Hey guys, today we're in the book of 1 Kings chapter 1. Now before we get started into the chapter, a couple things I just want to tell you about the book of 1 Kings. Like 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings is really one book. It's only in our English Bible is it split just because it's easier for us to delineate 1 Kings, 2nd Kings chapters, verses of that nature. But it's really one book that tells one story and it kind of takes us all over the place through a lot of people. But here's the main point to think about of the book of Kings. 1st and 2nd Samuel, or Samuel together, tells us that God is going to send another king like David to rescue them, to be the Messiah, right? And so there's going to be a greater one to come than David. The book of Kings is all about a bunch of people after David, but it shows us that all of the kings that come after David are not better than David. They are not the Messiah. They are not the answer to the problem. And so even though some kings in the book of Kings is good, majority of them are bad. And it's just showing us that people fail. Kings fail. There has to be a better king to come that will not fail. And of course, we know him as Jesus, but to those during this time, it's a point of saying that maybe you shouldn't be looking to an earthly king. And so we pick up today on chapter 1, and we kind of are getting near to the last days of David's life. And it says, now King David was old and advanced in years. And I find that funny because if you do the math and you say, well, how old is David? David is 70 years old right here in chapter 1. He's 70 years old. And you say, well, that's not terribly old. But you must think of all that David has done. He has fought in many battles, many wars. He's been king. He's nearly been killed 1,000,000 times by Saul and by other people. And so it's kind of the mileage. There's a lot of mileage on the body, right? And so though he's not necessarily old by age, there is some time. And so he's getting old, he's getting sickly. We see here that they get a young woman to come along. This would have been a virgin, probably would have made him his concubine. And basically, she lays with him to give him warmth and to serve on him. Now, as we read this, we think, man, that seems really weird, but it's not weird in these times. There's nothing necessarily sinful about what is happening. This was a common practice back in those days, that you would take a young woman with an old man and that it would raise his spirits. It would invigorate him, that he would try to act younger, better, bolder, and that he would perk up, right? And so without going into too much details, that's the point, right? And so they get this lady that comes in along with him, but notice it says the king knew her not. Now, one thing I also want to say about this lady, I've heard my whole life that maybe this woman, right? It says that she is Abishag the Shunammite. Okay, the Shunammite. Notice the spelling, Shunammite. I've heard a lot of times in my life that this could be the woman that Solomon is writing to in the Song of Songs. But if you know Song of Songs well, it is not to a Shunammite woman, it is to a Shulamite woman. It's two different, S-H-U-L, S-H-U-N, right? Two different places. And so I've heard my whole life that, this could have been that as she was serving David, Solomon met her and fell in love with her, and now he's writing her these love stories in the Song of Songs. And I just don't believe that's the case because she is from a different region. She is a Shunammite, not a Shulamite, okay? It's a little Jeopardy moment there for you. Just wanted to put you in on some knowledge. But David is old, he is sick, and so what happens? Well, his son tries to take over, one of his sons. Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself. This is the fourth son of Solomon. We know that the first two are dead from war. The third one, we believe, is either dead or something's wrong with him that he can't rule, and so that makes Adonijah the king that should take the throne. Right? So he's not just kind of coming out of left field. He is the one that should take the throne, but his dad is not dead yet. But here he goes and he starts to exalt himself, which is a sin because only God should exalt us, right? Not us ourselves. That's pride. And what happens? He gets some chariots, he gets some horsemen, and he gets a bunch of men, and it says that they were running before him. We would call this today a presidential campaign. He's running people to get people excited for him. Notice what it tells us about Adonijah. His father never displeased him. His father never rebuked him. His father never spoke to him and said, hey, you shouldn't do this or why you shouldn't doing that. David, though he was a good man, he was a bad father. He was not involved in his children, right? And so what does this make? This makes brats. That's exactly what it makes. So children that go undisciplined become brats, and he is an adult brat. Not only that, he was handsome like his father. David was handsome. What happens? And he conferred with Joab, David's general, right? Zariah, Abiathar, the priest, and they came and helped him, right? But notice who did not. Zadok, which is a priest, Benaiah, Nathan, which is a prophet, Shimei, Uriah, and David's mighty men were not with Adonijah. So there were people on Adonijah's side, but there was a lot of people who were not. The kingdom is beginning to split, right? And this will be the tale of what we will read chapter after chapter in the book of Kings. And so what happens? Adonijah throws a party. He goes and he sacrifices a bunch of animals. He basically says free food and gets everybody to like him and to do all these things, much like a politician does today. He makes promises. He kisses babies. He shakes hands. He feeds them. Hey, vote for me, right? And that's exactly what he's doing. But there's a problem. The problem is David has told Bathsheba that the son that she had, the second son, the first one dies, the second one, that he should take the throne. And so we see Bathsheba and Nathan, the prophet Nathan that we saw back in the book of Samuel, they come back to the king and say basically, hey, your son is trying to take over. That is no good. Remember the promise you made? And David said, I remember the promise that I made. And he calls the important people of the kingdom and says, hey, Solomon should be king. He will be king. And David tells the officials, right, the priest and the officials, the elders of Israel, he says, here's what you should do. You should take Solomon. You should put him on my own mule. You should take him to the spring of Gihon. You should anoint him. You should blow the trumpet. You shall say, long live King Solomon, and then you should set him on my throne. David tells them a list of things that they need to do with Solomon to make him king, so that Adonijah could not come back and say he's not the king. There would be plenty of proof that he's the king. And that's exactly what they do. They put them on David's mule, basically a presidential kind of parade, if you will. They take him to Gihon, which is known today as the spring of Gihon. It's the only place in and around Jerusalem at this time that there's fresh water. Okay, so Gihon is an important place. It's a place where there's water in the middle of the desert. So there's lots of people all the time around the spring of Gihon. So they take him there, they anoint him there. So there's many witnesses around. They anoint him because he's king. They blow the trumpet, right? They start a celebration, they start a party, and they all yell, long live King Solomon. So they're anointing and they are proclaiming that he he is the king, and then they bring him back to the palace and they sit him on the throne of David. There is no way that anybody can dispute that he is the king of Israel. But while this was happening, Adonijah was having a party. He was having a banquet, a celebration, and all of a sudden people start to hear the noise, the horns, and people celebrating, and they're thinking, what's going on? And all of a sudden we see a messenger come onto the scene, a guy named by Jonathan. He says, "You won't believe what happened. David said Solomon is the king." And they put him on as a mule. They anointed him at the spring of Gihon. They proclaimed he is the king. They put him on David's throne, the royal throne. And now what happens, everything that Adonijah has worked for so much is now beginning to crumble. Not only the things that he did, but the people are there celebrating or thinking, we chose the wrong side. We chose Adonijah, but it was Solomon. And now they're scared for themselves, right? They're scared that Solomon will come and kill them all. And that's why it says that they trembled and they arose. And notice how scary the situation is. Verse 50 tells us that Adonijah feared Solomon so much that he went and he took hold of the altars, the horns of the altars, and he was holding there. And Solomon hears this is what he's doing. And Adonijah says, "I'm not letting go of this altar until Solomon swears to me that he will not kill me." Because remember, we talked about this before in Samuel, that it was very normal that when there's a new king, they would kill everybody in line for the king so that he would remain on the throne and his children would remain on the throne, right? And so it was very common practice of doing this. And so now Adonijah, he even though he's not the king, he could be in line for the throne, and he knows, hey, Solomon's going to wipe me out. There's no way I'm doing this. And notice what Solomon said. He says, Adonijah says, hey, I'm not going to let him go until Solomon swears he's not going to kill me. But Solomon says this, verse 52, "If he will show himself a worthy man, not one of his hairs shall fall to the earth, but if wickedness is found in him, he shall die." Well, that's an amazing line. Solomon didn't make a blind promise to just, I'm not going to kill you, because that didn't work out for David so well, and it didn't work out for Saul so well. Solomon was a little bit wise. He says, hey, if you're a good man and you can get behind me, I'll promise you nothing will ever happen to you. But if you work against me, well, that's it. You're toast, right? So King Solomon sent, they brought him down from the altar, and he came and paid homage to King Solomon, which means he bowed down to King Solomon. And Solomon said to him, "Go to your house." Solomon said, "Let's see how this plays out." And we will see how this plays out. It does not play out very well. But here we see that once again, David is not dead. David is still alive. He is old. He is probably incapacitated, but he has chosen Solomon. Solomon is now the new king. He has been anointed at the spring of Gihon. He has rode the king's mule. Israel has, or at least Jerusalem at best, has declared that he is king, and he is set on the throne of King David. So he is the king. And now we have to see how the world will play to a new king. Remember, this is only the third king that they've had. Saul got removed. David came, and he came as a victorious warrior and leader, and everybody loved him. But now this is the first king, Solomon, that is by succession. It's not that God picked him, that God anointed him, that all of Israel celebrated. It's that he was just the son of David. Now, Solomon will become a great king, but this is the first time of successional kingship that's happening. So what is Israel going to do? How are they going to interact with that? And that begins to kick off the book of Kings on how Israel relates to each and every king as they don't measure up to the king that God promised them that would come after David, that would be better and greater than David. Hope that makes a little bit more sense, and we will see you tomorrow in chapter 2. God bless.